Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagenau. We're here in Studio 130 at ITR headquarters in Central Iowa. We are joined here again in studio with John Hendrickson and Chris Ingstad. Welcome this afternoon, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Did you cut the music a little short?
Is that enough more?
Let it go for a while next time. Now we're
okay.
Now
right.
okay.
We did
now
we,
we're
we
there.
We overdid it. All right. Okay. First things first, gentlemen. I want to kick things off. John and I were having a great conversation before we went on air, and while
that's better than we were having a great conversation until you walked in, Chris.
Well. Okay.
Which is sort of the same thing, but
sort of the same thing. Okay. So I thought it would benefit our listeners. So John and I were sort of thinking about the future of the program and what we'd like to do with this, and also, our dreams of someday constructing the Hendrickson Library. And the folks have heard us talk about this before, John.
Yes. Yeah.
But so I'm going to actually, this is one of those ones, we've had trivia contests. I'm going to throw this out to the listeners, and I genuinely would like their feedback. But what would you like to see in a studio setup for the ITR Live podcast? Now, we have some ideas here. But John, what you want? I mean, you want to share with the listeners kind of what you're thinking?
I think we should duplicate the McLaughlin Group setup, where we have 5 chairs and a round table in the middle, and you're going to be in the head chair as moderator, just like John McLaughlin was,
and a grumpy old curmudgeon telling everyone they're wrong.
That's right.
Yes, okay, yeah. Yeah, Chris, what you got? I know you have an idea.
I want to recreate the Merv Griffin show set from Seinfeld.
From the Merv Griffin show. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay. I think it'd be great.
And maybe we can do some sort of vinyl stick-ups on the wall. I don't know.
Yeah. I'd like some sort of like late night show, desk, big obnoxious microphone on the desk, and then you guys or whoever else on the couch. And
maybe we get
John's sort of the Ed McMahon type. And,
do we need to get John on the bottle to really be Ed McMahon?
Well, good. What? But
go
ahead, because I think I know where you need to go now.
Well, I'm concerned about the camera.
Right.
You guys can probably see, and I'm just hoping the camera doesn't pick up. I spilled on my shirt over lunch.
Okay.
I had a date with our oldest daughter. It's her birthday. And this is the child, John, who she's very skeptical of the Chinese government. Mm-hmm. We make her read every John Hendrickson piece there is.
Yeah.
We don't bat 1,000 as parents at our house, but we do teach our kids God and country, and part of that curriculum there is your work. So Laurel, as you know, big fan of your work. Really skeptical of what the Chinese government's up to. But we shared a lovely lunch today, and it was great. So,
yeah. Well, in addition to a brand new studio someday, we're going to get true pro quality cameras, lighting, and we'll be able to like zoom in right there on the spot. Right
on that mole sauce. Good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's going to be great. John's looking forward to being in makeup every time we do the show, and I'm telling you, I keep promising you, John, we're going to make you famous.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, so I think I want to touch on something here, gentlemen, that I know a lot of conservative media is having a lot of fun with today, but is this whole idea of Bidenomics. So you've seen this, right? Is that this is a new messaging push from the White House to talk about the Biden record on the economy. And so the jokes almost write themselves, right? I mean, as we're Americans have a pretty good sense where the economy's at right now, and I think they blame Joe Biden for it. I saw one poll today that he has a 34% approval rating on the economy. Oh. So in some sense, the more that the White House wants to talk about the Biden record on the economy, I suppose, knock yourselves out, guys. But John, I wanted to bring you in here, and we can talk about what Bidenomics is and isn't. Now, I'm reading out of Politico that the White House comms team said that a range of efforts, this is what they think Bidenomics is: bolstering manufacturing investments, expanding high-speed internet access, and cracking down on industries that charge so-called junk fees. Okay, fine. I'm sure they, aim high, guys. But I want to look at this as really is almost a scholarly effort at this. So we're how far are we in? 2.5 years into the Biden administration, and most of his policies on the economy, on taxes have been put into place. What is your perspective on what history will say about the Biden economy and the Biden policies on the economy and growth in this country? So I'm going to let you what do you think that really is?
Well, I think to kind of understand what Bidenomics is we have to look at.
If you want to make fun of him too, I mean, go right ahead. Don't feel constrained by my question.
No, but I mean, if we want to put that in historical perspective, we have to look at sort of the progressive origins of his economic policy, and that really originates in the early 20th century with progressives who were actually in both political parties at that time, both Republican and Democrat, but primarily the chief architect of what President Biden is doing was Franklin Roosevelt, President Franklin Roosevelt, FDR, and you see what Biden has done. For example, the $1.92 trillion American Rescue Plan Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. His agenda fits in with what we'd call the Keynesian economic model of basically trying to spur economic growth through massive government spending, and that includes infrastructure spending. For example, the president said the other day, actually comparing to a New Deal program, rural electrification, comparing that with broadband and expanding that. So the problem is that, and I'm not sure if you guys saw that the CBO came out this week with a report that showed that not only has Biden spent $6 trillion, but the CBO had a very depressing debt projection of within the next 30 years, we're going to borrow $116 trillion. And so what this does, and this is what Franklin Roosevelt did, is basically you're trying to spur economic growth through massive government spending, and it doesn't work. And it hasn't worked for Bidenomics, because what's happening is basically we're seeing, I think the economy is growing at 1%. So we're seeing very low economic growth. We all know we're seeing the highest inflation we've had in many years, which is one of the reasons why Americans are very much disapproving of this agenda, because even though inflation may have gone down a little bit, people are still paying more in gas. They're still paying more at the grocery store.
John, I want to interrupt you on that inflation comment. Saying inflation has gone down, what it means is the growth rate of inflation has slowed. It's not growing as fast as it was maybe the last month.
Yes.
Our dollars still have less spending power
every month
over month.
Right.
That just rate has slowed down.
And after such a rapid and frankly sustained climb in inflation, we're supposed to celebrate that might be leveling off a little bit. It's not like we've gone back to normal.
Yeah.
Right. The last 24 months of inflation is here to stay.
Yeah.
So just because we're leveling off that growth rate a little bit, that's not exactly a cause of celebration.
And the other thing is we all know inflation eats away at wages, and so earnings are not growing as fast enough. So people are actually earning less since Biden took office. And to bring this back to Roosevelt tried all this spending to lower unemployment, because that was a huge problem of the Great Depression. You had massive levels of unemployment at one time, 25%. And keep in mind, during the Great Depression, that women really didn't work. So that meant 25% of all households really had no income. So it was a huge crisis. All of that spending that Roosevelt did through his New Deal and the alphabet soup agencies did not solve the Depression. And in fact, one of Roosevelt's cabinet officials even testified in Congress saying, we have spent money, we have spent tons of money, and it's not working. And so we're seeing the same thing with Bidenomics, where they're trying to sell it because, for example, they have thrown subsidies that the Inflation Reduction Act has subsidized some businesses, and so they're taking credit of that for creating some jobs, which it may have done. But if the three of us wanted to subsidize someone to go dig a hole out by our new patio, we could probably get someone to do that. And so, but the problem is, I think, is that they're trying to dress this up to make it look good, and it's just not working.
John, I want to see if anything to say about this. Is you've talked about some things that Biden and his administration have done to directly, the primary thing they're trying to accomplish was an economic goal or economic end. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think about a number of his other policies that he's tried to push or promote that have had, frankly, really detrimental economic consequences. I think of their sort of fascination with green energy and such.
Oh yes, yeah,
and our move away from U.S. energy independence, which really means oil and coal and those things, right? And what that has done, what those sort of moves have done to the price at the pump and such.
Yep.
And so his move towards green energy is not necessarily an economic play, right? I don't know if that necessarily fits under a Keynesian model, right? But it definitely has a big time and negative impact on the economy, right? And so I suppose if we sat and thought for very long, we'd come up with a number of those things where he's got some other policy things he's working on.
Well, that's
that in his mind,
yeah.
Because again, these guys have never actually held a job or worked in the private sector, had to make a payday, right, Chris?
Right.
But his mind, well, this is an economic issue, this is an energy issue, and it's like, well, great, but the price of the pump now says otherwise, Joe.
Yeah.
So where are we?
Well, the war on energy that they've done through their radical green energy agenda is something that obviously the New Deal didn't address, but that has had economic consequences because it has impacted. We were energy independent in the Trump administration. Now we're not. We also see the boondoggle of whether it's subsidizing solar or some of these other green energy things, and the other, I think, dangerous thing is what the administration has done is they have, through a lot of bureaucratic red tape, has prevented mining, and not so much here in Iowa, but in a lot of states where we could actually be mining, which creates jobs and as well as some of those rare earth metals that we desperately need, cannot be done because of these strict environmental regulations. So the combination of this massive government spending, tax increases, this war on energy has really is all Biden economics, and it's not working.
I'm glad you brought up some of those their pieces at the end, John, because obviously it is Bidenomics is Keynesian spending at a level that we at least haven't seen since the New Deal, if ever, in American history.
Yeah, massive.
Just completely blow out federal spending in a way that we can't afford and hope that juices the economy or buys enough votes or whatever it is that we're trying to do here.
And
but go ahead.
Well, we were talking about this on the last podcast, but go back to the American Rescue Plan, $2 trillion. We never needed it. And it was supposed to be a lifesaver because of supposedly we needed it for COVID reasons. And look at those blue states now that have basically benefited from all that spending. They're in budget trouble now because of their excessive spending. And that was the reason we had high inflation, was because right away, immediately, they just started spending money that we didn't have to.
But I think it's important that we not forget the other part that you mentioned, John, is beyond the fiscal calamity. It's all of the ways that the government is in the way, and that the whole effort is to try and take the private sector and that individual, free market decision, that the free capitalism piece, and put government in the way. Government getting in the way of energy, getting in the way of all these other regulatory pieces we can. In there, I would suspect the intent to engineer a tomorrow that they see as better, regardless of the impact on our economy. And so when the economy fails, when we see this economic malaise, whatever technical definition you want to use of recession or whatever, it should not be a surprise when you have an administration that has thrown up roadblock after roadblock after roadblock to the growth of business in this country.
I'm glad you articulated that, because I was trying to do the same thing on paper before we started, is just looking at how on almost every front, Iowa stands in such a stark contrast to what the federal government is doing.
Right.
We don't get it all right.
Yeah.
And even among the folks who we generally agree with or support, we have disagreements from time to time. But we are making a big time effort in this state to reduce the tax burden, right? To quit taking so much from you. We're trying to stem the growth of government spending, and we're sure trying to lighten the burden that government regulation puts on your shoulders, or the red tape and the hurdles that they put in front of you. We're trying to clear those things away.
Right.
And while we're not exactly utopia yet, we're making progress on all those fronts in this state. And again, maybe you don't even notice it until you sort of like lay on top of it what DC is doing, and you see the differences.
I'm glad you asked, because that leads right into what I wanted to talk about next.
Good.
Which is the Iowa Business Council, which is an organization that makes up the largest businesses in the state of Iowa. They do a quarterly survey of what their businesses, their level of optimism about the future of their businesses and the economy. And so these are the folks that really, I think, have
they're kind of the bell cows of Iowa's economy.
At least as good of an understanding of what's happening in Iowa as anyone. And so they released their report for the second quarter. And according to their economic outlook, their survey indicates strong confidence in Iowa's economy, with the index rising since the previous quarter. 21 chief executives talking about this, and consider this a robust increase in their levels of optimism about Iowa's economy. So, considering the backdrop of what's happening across the country and Americans' belief in where things are going economically, to have the exact opposite happening in Iowa when we're still operating under the yoke of Bidenomics, I think is really saying something, that this is a place where businesses are growing and thriving. John, you wanted to say something on that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. That's a great point, because, as we mentioned before, there's states that are starting to see some really budget problems. Iowa is still strong, and the reason for that is that even with all the national economic uncertainty, it's because Governor Reynolds and the legislature have followed some really good fiscal policies that have built a strong foundation for the state, and that's one of the reasons why we're sort of weathering all this uncertainty, and Iowa's in such a good economic position right now.
Yeah. Well, I want to this part in here really grabbed my attention. So this is from the article at Iowa Capital Dispatch, which is not exactly a right-wing publication. And, I don't think John, knock it off. I'm trying to be serious here. And I also, look, these 21 chief executives, they're not, they're across the political spectrum as well. Right. But here's what they say. And this is according to
Can I interject?
Please.
Sorry. Having worked for one of these corporations,
yes,
personally knowing some of the CEOs of the other ones, the thing that is somewhat unifying in most of these corporations is in fact the bottom line.
Yes.
So you could put policy or politics or anything aside, and again, probably a diverse view of those things. But they all understand and are driven by black and white, responsibility to their shareholders for good value and return. So, that's where the rubber meets the road for most of these folks.
So, Joe Murphy, friend of many of us,
yep.
yes, and president of the Iowa Business Council, has said that generally that the optimism can be partially attributed to tax changes passed by the legislature in 2022. Here's his quote. I would say the last few years in particular have been really positive for business. We've put in a lot of key policies with respect to workforce development, realigning our workforce development initiatives here at the state level. Most importantly, so among all of that, I think you'd have to look at the tax reform packages that were passed in 2022. So that gives us a great sense of optimism, not just in the short term, but in the long term. So here are the chief executives of Iowa's largest businesses, the folks that really are at the core of the economic engine that drives this state. And what gives them the greatest optimism about the future of their businesses and the growth in the state of Iowa? The tax changes that we've been talking about repeatedly.
Oh, well, you all are welcome. We hope you enjoy it.
Great. Well, and we're not done yet.
No.
But this is what we're talking about. Yes, we want people to be excited because there's more dollars in their pocket and they can go spend that and do what they want with it because we know they can make better decisions with their dollars than government can. Yes, that's great. And we will say that over and over. But the other half of that, beyond just being the right thing to do by the taxpayers that foot the bill, is that it's good for business. Mm-hmm. And they grow and there are more opportunities for Iowans, not just to have more of their paycheck in their pocket, but a chance for their business and their employer to grow and give them more opportunities and grow their workforce. Yeah. That's what we're talking about here, is both the individual level of individual success and then the growth and the opportunities that are present for all of us.
Yeah. Business is like certainty. And so I think Iowa's policies in the last few years have created that certainty and they're responding to that.
I still remember after the first round of tax cuts that you guys did, Chris, we were doing a round table somewhere, and some small to mid-sized business owner was there, and their comment was like, "We're just so thrilled to know that you're with us." Right. For years, they'd been conditioned to wonder when the next time government was going to whack them in one form or another. And they said, "We're just glad to know you're with us."
Yeah.
Right. I mean, talk about, and so if they felt like that after one round of tax cuts. Now after three, as Joe indicates, they're feeling pretty optimistic.
Well, so I want to move on from this so Iowa's larger businesses, and frankly, I think we know that small and medium-sized businesses like these tax changes as well, right? So the changes to the tax code in the last couple of years are positive for Iowa's economy. Because they're telling us that.
Yes.
One of those changes is something that we talked about on the last podcast, which is their research activities credit.
So
good. We've made changes to this, and yet Iowa's economy is still showing strength.
Yeah.
I think you have a couple other things you'd like to add to that.
I do.
Since we last recorded.
First of all, earlier, John, you use the term something, trying to sell something that's not working. And I got to tell you, the data shows that the folks who are advocating for more research activities credit, they're advocating, they're trying to sell something that's not working. I thought maybe that I was a little bit too harsh on them talking about the principles of why moving away from this credit, this crony capitalism system, so I wanted to go back and look at the data. And John was kind enough to pull up the minutes and the report from the what used to anyway be known as the Tax Credit Review Committee. And I think we don't do that anymore. No. Isn't that right, John? Yeah. So the last time this committee met and presented findings was about a year and a half ago. Okay. And Department of Revenue did an analysis on a bunch of different credits, including the research and activities credit. And I won't bore you all with the entire study, but they point out the history of this. They point out that historically this had been a refundable credit, meaning the state could actually cut you a check back. Okay. And it posed some research questions, things they were hoping to answer through this study. And it says, do incremental research activity tax credit programs stimulate research inputs and outputs? In other words, is there more activity because of the credit? Okay. Seems like a reasonable question. The other question they ask is, what specific program features, if any, are effective at stimulating research inputs and outputs? And I'll tell you what they tried to do was they wanted to look at whether the fact that it was refundable, if that made a difference, and they wanted to look and see if the rate mattered. Like if we crank up the rate of this credit, will that generate more?
If a little bit's good, is more better.
Right. So okay, that seems very reasonable. They go and this is a detailed economic statistical
nonpartisan
analysis.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. You tell me when a regression analysis became partisan, right? So here's where we start to get some of the conclusions. The rate is the rate. In other words, as you turn up the rate, it's actually associated with less research and development. And the refundability factor, so the fact the state can cut a check back. Also, this is just data driven. Remember, guys, refundability is associated with less R&D and fewer patents. So then it says, okay, if we take what we know, what would this do for predicted outcomes, right? We've done this whole in-depth study, and it says, what if Iowa didn't have an RAC program? And it says, without the RAC, the model predicts Iowa would have more private R&D per capita, an increase of about 29%. What if Iowa did not have a refundable research activities credit? Without the refundable RAC, the model predicted Iowa to have more private R&D per capita. What if it had increased the rate? Okay, so what if little's good and more? Increasing the rate, the model predicted that Iowa would have fewer private R&D per capita dollars, and in increasing. So in other words, here's the conclusion. Right. So, I mean, I hope everybody heard what I just said.
You're holding up right there the report
at every
from LSA.
At every turn, it's actually moving things in the wrong direction. So, limited evidence that RAC programs increase research inputs and outputs. RAC programs associated with less R&D, and neither refundability nor rate appear to positively impact inputs and outputs. I mean, Chris, as I was sharing with you, when I was in private industry, if our detailed, in-depth analysis would have generated this, that program would have been cut that day, and frankly, a lot of people would have lost their jobs.
Yes.
And yet, we continue to have, and these programs have been scaled down, and that's good, right?
Kudos to the legislature for going the right direction on this.
But to sit there and yell and complain and demand these credits, I mean, goodness gracious, the facts tell you you're actually hurting yourself by doing this. So I don't even know what to say, right? I mean, I sensed that these things weren't super effective, and my sense was that a lot of this activity would be happening even without the credit.
Right. Now,
I didn't realize just how detrimental the credit was.
Yeah. Now, this is where we'll move from what the report actually says to me guessing. But if you take away those research dollars from the recipients of the credit, but yet you get more research activity on the back end, I would suspect that means because it's then cast across, the rest of Iowa's economy.
Could be.
Which is probably much more organic of folks trying something new because they actually, free market have made a decision. Hey, let's try this and see if we can make some money at it, instead of, hey, I'll try this if I can get government to fund it.
Because historically anyway, there was limited eligibility for this. In other words, not every industry or business was eligible. I mean, goodness gracious, what if you had the bad luck of stepping into leadership of being in the wrong industry?
Right.
You're just out of luck.
Yeah. And it's...
So I guess what I wanted to close this loop is we have our own ideologies or principles and ways that we think things would work better and fair. Okay. And that's fair, and we should talk about those things. And we came back today and talked about what the data says, and the data frankly supports our view. So again, I being told that we misunderstand, I was just reading right from the report, Chris, that I was, there's very little analysis or understanding done on my part. Yep. So again, would love to know how we're misunderstanding these things.
Here's what we know. And this comes from not the three of us sitting at the table here in Studio 130. This comes from, I got two things to land this on. And the first one comes from Iowa's big business leaders. And the other one comes from our nonpartisan Legislative Services Agency regression report by The Economist.
Yeah.
So this isn't us talking, it's them. And what they're saying is that we don't need these tax credits to be successful. In fact, they may be counterproductive, and that the tax changes that were made last year, which scaled some of those back, have increased optimism among those business leaders.
Yep. We could probably in post-production just cut out everything I said. Just jump right to your
straight
conclusion.
up there to the end. Yeah. But don't take our word for it. You usually should take our word for it because I think we're really smart and we got lots of hot takes. But on this one, you don't have to. You can go straight to these experts who are telling you that you don't need it.
Yep.
Okay, great. John, do you feel any better about refundable corporate tax credits than you did before the last podcast started?
I do, yeah.
Okay, good. All right, we sold you on it.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate it. Be safe this weekend. I think we have a lot of folks on the road traveling, go celebrate our nation's independence.
Yeah, goodness gracious. Yeah, that's right. We have an extended weekend.
Yeah.
We won't be back until after Independence Day. You know, again, much like we commented around Memorial Day, like take some, enjoy the time off work, enjoy family, enjoy friends, enjoy all of those things, but also take some time to, just reflect on a little bit, what that means.
Yep. Go to a parade, wave the flag, enjoy that you and your neighbors and your fellow Iowans and fellow Americans can all get out. And hopefully for one day, we don't have to have the divisions. We can just go be Americans, right? And John will encourage you all to go read the Declaration.
Yeah, that's right.
And, but it really is, it's special. Don't blow your hand off, but blow something up because that's freedom right there. And, have a great time. So, well, with that, we're signing off, and we will be back to share with you all of our wonderful Independence Day festivities and get back to celebrating freedom and the future of this state. So, gentlemen, thanks a lot. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to tell your friends. And with all of that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.